Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Akuma trained Deku from 4 years old in Ansatsuken style of Satsui no Hado preparing for heroism? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not built on fairness. It is built on power. That was the first lesson Izuku Midoriya learned, though he did not have the vocabulary to articulate it at the tender age of 4. He understood it not through words, but through the crushing weight of silence that filled the doctor's office. The room smelled of antiseptic and cold indifference. The doctor, a man with bushy goggles and a demeanor that suggested he had delivered this news 1,000 times before, leaned back in his chair. The squeak of the leather was the only sound in the room for a long, agonizing moment. "You should probably give it up, kid." The words hung in the air, heavier than gravity. Beside Izuku, his mother Inko went stiff. Her hand, which had been resting protectively on Izuku's shoulder, tightened its grip, her fingernails digging into his fabric. Izuku didn't blink. He sat on the exam table, his legs swinging just inches above the floor, his red sneakers scuffed at the toes. He was clutching his limited edition All Might action figure, the Silver Age variant, so tightly that the plastic cape was digging into his palm. "Doctor," Inko's voice wavered, a fragile thing threatening to break. "Are you sure? Is there some mistake? The other children in his kindergarten have already started manifesting their quirks. Izuku is the only one who—" "It's not a mistake, Mrs. Midoriya," the doctor interrupted, pointing a pen at the X-rays illuminated on the wall. "It's basic biology. You see this? The extra joint in the pinky toe. It's an evolutionary relic. A throwback. In 99% of cases, the presence of this joint indicates a total lack of quirk factors." He turned off the light box with a harsh click. The sudden dimness felt like a coffin closing. "He is quirkless. He's running on hardware that's a century out of date. He can't breathe fire, he can't float objects, and he certainly can't be a hero." The doctor turned to his computer, typing up the final report, dismissing them entirely. He didn't see the way Izuku's head lowered, shadowing his eyes. He didn't see the way the boy's trembling hands stopped shaking, freezing into rigid claws. Izuku didn't cry. Not yet. He felt something else. A sensation he couldn't name. It started in his stomach, a cold, twisting knot that wasn't fear and wasn't sadness. It was a void. It was the feeling of a door being slammed in his face, locked, and bolted, leaving him out in the cold while everyone else enjoyed the warmth of the fire. "Give it up." The words echoed in his mind, bouncing off the walls of his skull. Give it up. Why? Give it up. Because of a toe? Because of a bone? Izuku looked down at his shoes. Inside them were feet that were apparently defective. Because of a piece of calcium, he wasn't allowed to dream. Because of biology, he was nothing. The rain started on the drive home. It beat against the windows of the small car, distorting the neon lights of Muzurifu into blurry streaks of color. Inko hadn't stopped crying since they left the clinic. She drove with a mechanical stiffness, wiping her eyes every time the car came to a red light. She kept glancing at Izuku in the rearview mirror, her expression a mask of heartbroken pity. That look. Izuku hated it. It was worse than the doctor's indifference. The doctor didn't care. Inko cared too much, but she cared for him as one cares for a wounded animal that will never walk again. She was mourning him, and he was sitting right there. "Izuku," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Do you want to get katsudon for dinner?" Izuku stared out the window. He watched a hero with a water-based quirk directing traffic in the rain, laughing as he worked. People cheered for him. "No," Izuku said softly. "Oh. Okay. Maybe we can watch the video? The one you like?" Izuku didn't answer. He just squeezed the All Might figure until his knuckles turned white. When they got home, the apartment felt too big. The silence was deafening. Izuku walked straight to the computer room. He didn't turn on the lights. The glow of the monitor was the only illumination, casting long, dancing shadows across the room filled with hero merchandise. Posters of All Might smiled down at him from every angle. "I am here!" the voice boomed from the speakers. The old video. The disaster relief footage. All Might, carrying a mountain of debris, saving 100 people in 10 minutes. He was laughing. He was strong. He was everything. Izuku watched it. Once. Twice. 10 times. Usually, this video filled him with hope. It made him vibrate with excitement, imitating the hero's pose. But tonight the laughter from the screen sounded like mocking. Look at what you can never be. The door creaked open behind him. Inko stood there, silhouetted by the hallway light. She looked at her son, trembling in the chair, staring at the screen with an intensity that bordered on madness. Izuku. She stepped into the room. Izuku spun the chair around. Tears were finally streaming down his face, but his eyes were wide, bloodshot, and frantic. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "Mom," he choked out. He's smiling. No matter how bad things get, he smiles. Because he's strong. He helps people because he's strong. He took a jagged breath, his chest heaving. Can I be a hero too? This was the moment. The pivotal second that would define his life. He needed her to say yes. He needed her to lie, if she had to. He needed her to tell him that spirit mattered more than biology. Inko crumbled. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him, burying his face in her stomach. She sobbed, her tears soaking into his hair. "I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry." Izuku went rigid. "I'm sorry." She didn't say yes. She didn't say he could do it. She apologized. She was apologizing for his existence. She was apologizing for birthing a defect. Something inside Izuku snapped. It was a quiet sound, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. The light in his emerald eyes dimmed, replaced by a dull, flat emptiness. He didn't hug her back. He sat there, encased in her pity, feeling the embers of a dark, unfamiliar heat ignite in the pit of his stomach. "They all think I'm broken," he thought, the voice in his head sounding strangely mature, ancient even. "They think I am nothing. If the world wouldn't give him power, then the world was wrong." The next day at kindergarten was the beginning of hell. News traveled fast in a world where uniqueness was currency. By the time Izuku arrived, everyone knew. The quirkless kid. At recess, the hierarchy reasserted itself. Katsuki Bakugo stood atop the jungle gym, small explosions popping in his palms like firecrackers. He looked down at Izuku, who was standing by the sandbox, alone. "Deku!" Katsuki shouted, creating a nickname that stripped Izuku of his identity in 2 syllables. "Is it true? You really are a blank?" The other children laughed. It was a cruel, innocent laughter. They didn't understand the devastation of it. They only understood that Izuku was different, and in nature, the different are prey. Izuku started, his voice small. Katsuki jumped down, landing with a heavy thud. He marched up to Izuku, flanked by his 2 lackeys. "You can't be a hero without a quirk, Deku. You're just a pebble in the road." "Useless." He shoved Izuku. Izuku stumbled back, falling into the sand. He looked up, expecting to feel fear. He usually did. Katsuki was loud, explosive, and terrifying. But today, looking at Katsuki's sneering face, Izuku didn't feel fear. He felt disappointment. Is this it? Izuku thought. Is this what power looks like? Pushing someone who can't push back? Say something, you useless nerd! Katsuki demanded, sparks flying near Izuku's face. Izuku stood up. He brushed the sand off his shorts. He looked Katsuki in the eye. You're loud, Izuku said. The playground went silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Katsuki's eyes widened, his pupils contracting into pinpricks of rage. What did you say? You're loud, Izuku repeated, his voice flat. And you're annoying, Katsuki screamed, a sound of pure offended ego, and lunged. His right hand, popping with nitroglycerin, swung for Izuku's face. It hit. There was a flash of light and a loud bang. Izuku was thrown backward, skidding across the dirt. His cheek burned, the skin blistered and red. Tears pricked his eyes from the pain, but he didn't scream. He lay there, looking up at the blue sky. Stay down, Deku! Katsuki yelled, smoke rising from his hand. Know your place. Izuku lay there for a long time, even after the teachers came rushing over, scolding Katsuki but ultimately doing nothing. Boys will be boys, they said with their eyes. The strong dominate the weak. It's natural. Izuku stood up, ignoring the nurse who tried to grab his arm. He walked. He walked out of the playground gate, which had been left slightly ajar. He walked down the street. He didn't want to go home. Home was pity. He didn't want to go to school. School was humiliation. He looked toward the horizon. Musudafu was a modern city, gleaming with glass and steel, but it was bordered by the dense, forested mountains of the prefecture. Dark, green, and silent. People said monsters lived in those mountains. Villains hiding from the law. Wild beasts. Good, Izuku thought. I want to see a monster. Maybe a monster won't look at me with pity. He began to walk toward the tree line. The climb was brutal. Izuku was 4 years old. His legs were short, his stamina non-existent. But he was driven by a feverish compulsion. He pushed through the underbrush, thorns tearing at his clothes and scratching his skin. The air grew colder as he ascended. The sounds of the city, the sirens, the cars, the hum of society, faded away, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the caw of crows. He walked for hours. The sun began to set, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but he ignored it. Thirst parched his throat, but he swallowed it down. He wanted to get away. Away from the quirk diagnosis. Away from All Might's smiling face. He found a path, an old, overgrown deer trail that wound its way up a steep cliff face. He climbed, his fingers bleeding as he gripped sharp rocks. Why didn't he stop? Why didn't he turn back? Because for the first time in his life, he was doing something difficult solely for himself. No one was watching. No one was judging. It was just him and the mountain. The mountain didn't care if he had a toe joint. The mountain only cared if he could climb. As twilight settled, casting the forest into deep shadow, Izuku stumbled into a clearing. It was a plateau, high up, overlooking the distant, glittering lights of the city. In the center of the clearing stood a cave mouth, dark and gaping like the maw of a beast. But it wasn't the cave that stopped Izuku. It was the pressure. The air in the clearing felt heavy, like walking through water. It vibrated with a low, thrumming hum that rattled Izuku's teeth. The birds were silent here. The insects didn't buzz. It was a circle of absolute, terrified stillness. In the center of the clearing, sitting in a lotus position on a flat rock, was a man. He was massive. Even sitting down, he looked like a boulder carved into human shape. He wore a dark, tattered gi, the color of dried blood or perhaps midnight blue, tied with a rope belt. His skin was tanned and weathered like old leather. His hair was a shock of crimson red, tied back in a topknot, defying gravity like a lion's mane. Around his neck hung a necklace of massive wooden prayer beads. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing, as far as Izuku could tell. He looked like a statue dedicated to a forgotten, violent god. Izuku should have run. Every instinct in his biology, the millions of years of evolution that the doctor had mocked, screamed at him to turn and flee. This was a predator. This was an apex entity, but Izuku couldn't look away. He took a step forward. A twig snapped under his sneaker. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. The man's eyes snapped open. They were red. Not the angry, explosive red of Bakugo's eyes. These were deep, glowing crimson, burning with an inner fire that seemed to consume the light around them. The scales were dark, shadowy. The pressure in the clearing multiplied tenfold. Izuku fell to his knees, gasping for air. It felt as if gravity had just focused entirely on him. The man stood up. He unfolded his body with the grace of a tiger. He turned to face the boy. A child. The man's voice was like grinding stones. It was deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of warmth. Why do you disturb my meditation? Izuku tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He trembled, his small body shaking like a leaf in a gale. The man, the entity, scoffed. Lost? Go back down the mountain, boy. This is not a place for the weak. The wolves will eat you before dawn. He turned his back on Izuku, dismissing him as insignificant. The weak. That word again. Something hot flared in Izuku's chest. It burned through the fear. It burned through the crushing pressure. Izuku croaked. The man paused. I have nowhere to go, Izuku whispered, forcing himself to stand up. His legs wobbled, but he locked his knees. The man looked over his shoulder. He seemed mildly surprised that the boy was standing under the weight of his ki. "The world is vast," the man said. "Go home to your mother." "I don't want to!" Izuku shouted. The scream tore at his throat. "I don't want them to look at me. I don't want them to say I'm broken." The man turned fully around. He studied the boy. He saw the scuff marks, the burns on the cheek, the tear tracks cutting through the dirt on his face. But mostly, he saw the eyes. Green eyes filled with a swirling chaotic mixture of despair, rage, and a profound, bottomless emptiness. The man walked forward. Each step he took left a depression in the hard earth. He towered over Izuku, a giant of muscle and power. "You are broken," the man said simply. "I can smell the weakness on you. You were born with nothing." Izuku clenched his fists. "I know," the doctor said. "I'm quirkless. I'm nothing. Quirkless." The man tasted the word, spitting it out like poison. A modern term for a modern disease. "You think power comes from genetics? You think strength is a lottery ticket given at birth?" The man raised a hand. He didn't touch Izuku. He pointed his palm at a massive boulder, easily the size of a car, resting near the cave entrance. "Watch." The man didn't scream. He didn't strain. He simply twisted his hips and thrust his palm forward. Hadoken, a sphere of blue energy, concentrated and violent, condensed in his palm and shot forward. It impacted the boulder. There was no explosion. There was simply erasure. The boulder shattered into dust. Not pebbles, not chunks. Dust. A shockwave blasted through the clearing, flattening the grass and nearly knocking Izuku over again. Izuku stared, his mouth agape. He had seen heroes destroy things. He had seen All Might punch through concrete. But this was different. There was no physical contact. It was pure energy. It was beautiful. "Was that a quirk?" Izuku asked, his voice barely audible. "No," the man growled. "That is the Ansatsuken. The assassin's fist. It is the power of the soul, honed through blood and agony. It is the mastery of one's own life force." He looked down at Izuku. "You have no quirk. Good. Quirks are crutches. They make men lazy. They make them rely on a single trick. True power comes from within. From the Hado." Izuku looked at the pile of dust that used to be a rock. Can I do that?" The man laughed. It was a terrifying sound, devoid of humor. "You? A crying child? You would die in the first week. My training destroys the body to rebuild the spirit. It requires you to abandon your humanity." The man leaned down, his face inches from Izuku's. His red eyes bored into Izuku's soul. "Tell me, boy. What is your name?" "Izuku. Izuku Midoriya." "Listen well, Izuku Midoriya. I am Akuma. And I am the wielder of the Satsui no Hado, the surge of murderous intent." Akuma straightened up. "To wield this power, you must embrace the darkness in your heart. You must be willing to destroy everything that stands in your way. You must be willing to become a demon." He gestured to the city lights below. "Down there, they play at being heroes. They save kittens and wave to cameras. They fight with limits. They hold back." Akuma sneered. "I do not hold back. If you follow me, you will walk a path of blood. You will not save people with a smile. You will crush evil with a fist of iron." Izuku looked down at the city. He saw the blinking lights of the place that had rejected him. He thought of the doctor. He thought of Bakugo. He thought of his mother's apology. He looked at his hands. They were small. Weak. Useless. But Akuma, this demon of a man, was telling him that strength was something you could take. That you could carve it out of the world if you had the will. "I don't care about being nice," Izuku whispered. The darkness in his heart, the Satsui, flickered. It was a tiny spark, but Akuma saw it. He sensed the potential for obsession in the boy. This child was empty, and emptiness could be filled with the Hado. "I want to be strong," Izuku said, louder this time. He looked up at Akuma, his green eyes burning with a desperate intensity. "I want to be the strongest. I want to be so strong that no one ever looks down on me again. I want," I want to win, Akuma grinned. It was a predator's grin, showing sharp teeth. Then prepare yourself, boy, Akuma said, turning back to the cave. Tonight, Izuku Midoriya dies. Tonight you step into the abyss. Akuma suddenly unleashed his full aura. It wasn't a physical attack, but a projection of pure sake, killing intent. The air turned red. Visions of death flooded Izuku's mind. He saw himself torn apart, crushed, incinerated. The primal fear was so intense that his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Most grown men would have fainted. Most pro-heroes would have buckled. Izuku screamed. It was a high, thin sound of terror, but he didn't fall. He dug his fingernails into his palms until blood flowed. He bit his lip until it cracked. He forced his eyes to stay open, staring into the red nightmare surrounding Akuma. I won't fall. I won't fall. I won't be weak. Akuma watched the boy struggle. He saw the boy's knees shaking, threatening to give out, but locking again and again through sheer force of will. Interesting, Akuma thought. He has no muscle. No skill. But his spirit is a starving wolf. Akuma retracted the aura. The pressure vanished instantly. Izuku collapsed to his hands and knees, gasping, sweat pooling beneath him. He felt like he had just run a marathon. You did not break, Akuma noted, his voice slightly less dismissive. Rare. Akuma walked into the darkness of the cave. He didn't look back. If you are still here at sunrise, the demon's voice echoed from the shadows, we begins. If you value your life, run back to your mother. Izuku remained on his hands and knees. His body screamed at him to run. The path down the mountain was right there. He could go home. He could eat katsudon. He could be safe. He could be a victim. Izuku slowly pushed himself up. He wiped the blood from his cheek. He looked at the city one last time, then turned his back on it. He walked toward the cave mouth. The darkness swallowed him whole. He sat down near the entrance, pulling his knees to his chest to ward off the cold. He clutched the All Might figure in his pocket, feeling the hard plastic. I am here, he thought, but the voice in his head was no longer All Might's. It was his own. The boy who walked into the cave was Izuku Midoriya. The boy who would walk out 10 years later would be something else entirely. The abyss gazed back, and Izuku did not blink. Part 1. The Breaking of the Vessel, age 4 to 6. The first lesson was pain. In the stories Izuku had watched on the internet, training montages were accompanied by inspiring music. There was a rhythm to them, a sense of swift progression. The hero lifted the weight, wiped the sweat from his brow, and suddenly he was strong. Reality, Izuku learned within the first 48 hours, was nothing like the montage. Reality was the taste of dirt. Reality was the sensation of lungs burning so hot they felt filled with broken glass. Reality was Akuma standing over him, a monolith of indifference, watching him vomit bile onto the forest floor. Stand up, Akuma commanded. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a rumble, low and terrifying, vibrating through the soles of Izuku's sneakers. Izuku, 4 years old and trembling, tried to push himself up. His arms were jelly. He had been carrying rocks, river stones that weighed as much as his head, up and down the slope of the ravine since sunrise. The sun was now high, a cruel white eye staring down at his misery. I can't, Izuku wheezed. Tears mixed with the grime on his face. He wanted his mother. He wanted his bed. He wanted to go back to being the victim. A shadow fell over him. Akuma grabbed the back of Izuku's shirt and hoisted him into the air, as if he weighed nothing more than a wet rag. He held the boy over the edge of the ravine, a drop of 50 feet into churning white water below. The world does not care if you can't, Akuma said, his red eyes boring into Izuku's. Gravity does not care. The rock does not care. Your enemies will certainly not care. You chose this path, boy. You looked into the abyss and asked for power. Did you think power was a gift? He dropped him. Izuku screamed. The wind rushed past his ears. He flailed, hitting the water with a bone-jarring smack. The cold was instantaneous, seizing his muscles. The current grabbed him, dragging him toward the rocks. Panic, primal and white-hot, flooded his brain. I'm going to die. I'm going to die here. Swim. The command didn't come from his brain, it came from his cells. He kicked. He clawed at the water. He swallowed a mouthful of the freezing river, coughing, choking, but he found a rhythm. He grabbed a slick root protruding from the bank and hauled himself up, shivering violently, retching water onto the moss. He looked up. Akuma was standing on the cliff edge, looking down. He nodded once and walked away. That was the pattern. Akuma did not teach Izuku how to throw a punch. Not yet. For the first 2 years, Akuma sought only to destroy the boy's body. He made Izuku sleep on the stone floor of the cave without a blanket. Softness breeds weakness, he said. He made Izuku hunt for his own food. At 4, Izuku ate berries and roots. By 5, he was setting traps for rabbits. By 6, he had to catch fish with his bare hands in the freezing stream. Izuku's hands, once soft and unblemished, became rough. His knuckles grew scabbed and scarred. His skin tanned, absorbing the sun and the dirt. But the hardest part wasn't the physical pain. It was the isolation. Izuku still went home. Akuma allowed it, though he called it a tether to mediocrity. Izuku would stumble back to the apartment in Yuzurifu on Sunday nights, looking like a war refugee. Inko Midoriya would weep. She would try to scrub the dirt from his skin, terrified by the bruises, the scrapes, the distant look in her son's eyes. Izuku, please, she begged one night, applying ointment to his blistered feet. You don't have to do this. We can just be normal. It's okay to be normal. Izuku looked at his All Might poster on the wall. The hero's smile seemed different now. It didn't look like reassurance. It looked like a mask. Normal means weak, Mom, Izuku whispered. His voice was raspy, changing. If I'm normal, they hurt me. If I'm strong, they can't. He went to kindergarten, but he was a ghost. When Bakugo and his friends tried to corner him, expecting the usual crying Deku, they found something else. Izuku didn't fight back. Akuma had forbidden him from using the Ansatsuken until he was worthy, but he didn't react. He stood there, taking the shoves, taking the insults. He looked at Bakugo not with fear, but with the dead, analytical stare of a butcher examining a cut of meat. It unnerved them. It wasn't fun to bully a stone. Part 2, The Awakening of the Hado, age 7 to 9. By age 7, Izuku's body had changed. He was still small for his age, stunted perhaps by the intensity of the trauma, but he was dense. Underneath his oversized shirts, he was a knot of wire-taut muscle. It was a stormy afternoon when Akuma finally decided the vessel was ready to be filled. They were in the cave. The rain lashed outside, thunder shaking the mountain. A fire crackled in the center of the cavern, casting long, dancing shadows. Sit, Akuma commanded. Izuku sat in the lotus position. He did this easily now. He could sit perfectly still for hours. You have built the temple, Akuma said, pacing around him. Now you must light the fire. Tell me, boy, what is a quirk? A genetic mutation, Izuku recited. A physical ability unique to the user. Wrong, Akuma barked. A quirk is a crutch. It is a biological accident. But Ki is the life force of the universe. It is in the air, the earth, the blood in your veins. Everyone has it, but only those with the will to seize it can use it. He placed a massive hand on Izuku's small shoulder. Close your eyes. Don't look outward. Look inward. Find the anger. The anger? The despair, Akuma whispered, his voice creeping into Izuku's ear like smoke. The moment the doctor told you were nothing. The moment your mother apologized for your existence. The laughter of the children who think they are gods because of a genetic lottery. Feel it. Don't push it away. Let it burn. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. He didn't want to feel that. He had spent 3 years trying to numb himself to those memories. Open the door, Izuku, Akuma pressed. The darkness is not your enemy. It is fuel, Izuku remembered. He remembered Bakugo's explosions popping against his skin. He remembered the pity in Inko's eyes. He remembered the feeling of being lesser. A spark ignited in his gut. It wasn't the warm, fuzzy feeling heroes talked about on TV. It was cold. It was jagged. It was a purple flame that tasted like iron. Yes, Akuma hissed. Pull it up. Through the spine. Into the fist. Izuku gritted his teeth. The energy surged. It felt like he was swallowing lava. His heart hammered a frantic rhythm, thump thump, thump thump, getting faster, harder. He thrust his hand forward, screaming, "HAA!" A tiny flicker of blue light popped from his palm. It fizzled out instantly, like a dying match. Izuku collapsed, panting, sweat soaking his GI. Akuma stood back, arms crossed. He didn't smile, but the scowl on his face had softened by a fraction of a millimeter. "Pathetic," Akuma said. "But it is a start." From that day, the training shifted. It was no longer just about carrying rocks. It was about Ansatsuken, the assassin's fist. Izuku learned the kata. Thousands of repetitions. The precise angle of the fist. The rotation of the hip. The breathing technique that drew ki from the diaphragm. Go Shoryuken. The dragon punch. Tatsumaki Senpukyaku. The hurricane kick. But the hardest was the philosophy. The Ansatsuken is a killing art, Akuma explained one evening as they ate roasted fish. It was created to assassinate. To destroy. Izuku stopped eating. "But I want to be a hero," Akuma sneered. "A hero. A man who fights to maintain the status quo. A man who arrests a murderer so he can escape and murder again. That is not strength. That is vanity. All might saves everyone," Izuku argued, his voice quiet but firm. He was the only person on earth who dared to argue with Akuma. "All might is a pillar holding up a rotting roof," Akuma countered. "When he breaks, and he will break, the roof will crush everyone underneath. True protection requires the elimination of the threat. If you face a wolf, you do not pull its teeth and let it go. You snap its neck. That is how you save the sheep." "I won't kill," Izuku said. He clutched his fist. "I'll use your power. I'll be the strongest. But I won't become a murderer." Akuma looked at the boy. The red eyes glowed in the dark. "We shall see," Akuma said ominously. "The Satsui no Hado, the surge of murderous intent, does not ask for permission. Once you tap into the dark Hado, it whispers to you. It tells you how easy it would be to end the fight. You think you are noble, boy? Wait until you hold a life in your hands and the Hado tells you to squeeze." Part 3, The Iron Forging, age 10 to 13. Puberty hit Izuku like a freight train, fueled by a diet of wild game and supernatural martial arts. By age 12, the softness of childhood was gone completely. Izuku was lean, his muscles defined like anatomical diagrams. He was covered in scars, white lines from thorns, jagged marks from slipping on rocks, bruises that never quite faded before new ones formed. His hands were calloused into stone. He could punch a tree trunk and leave an indentation without feeling pain. He began to master the techniques. The Hadouken became his signature. At first, it was a ball of concussive force. Then, Akuma taught him to refine it. To compress the ki until it was solid. "Don't just throw energy," Akuma barked as Izuku blasted a target dummy made of logs. "Put your will into it. You want to destroy the target? Then the target is already dead before the energy leaves your hands." Izuku fired. The blue sphere screamed through the air, obliterating the log. "Better," Akuma grunted. "Now dodge." Akuma moved. He didn't run, he slid across the ground, leaving a trail of purple afterimages. Ashura Senku. He appeared behind Izuku. A fist aimed for the back of Izuku's head. Izuku didn't turn. He sensed the sake, the killing intent. He dropped low, sweeping his leg in a wide arc. Akuma jumped over it, bringing a heel down like a guillotine. Izuku rolled, the ground exploding where his head had been a second ago. They sparred daily now. These weren't practice matches. They were survival tests. Akuma held back enough to keep Izuku alive, but not enough to keep him whole. Izuku broke ribs. He dislocated shoulders. He learned to pop his joints back into place and keep fighting. He learned to embrace the pain. Pain was information. Pain meant he was still conscious. But the Satsui no Hado was always there, scratching at the back of his mind. It happened during a sparring match when Izuku was 13. Akuma had him pinned, pressing a knee into Izuku's chest, suffocating him. "Weak," Akuma taunted. "You are still just a quirkless Deku. You will die here, and no one will remember you." Deku. The word triggered something. The memories of the schoolyard. The years of silence. The frustration of being the only one without a gift. The world went red. Izuku roared. It wasn't a human sound. Dark purple energy flared around his body, blowing Akuma back. Izuku stood up, but his eyes were gone, replaced by glowing white voids. His hair spiked up, dancing in the updraft of his own aura. He moved. He was faster than he had ever been. He appeared in front of Akuma and delivered a shoryuken to the master's chin. The impact cracked the air. Akuma actually slid back 2 meters, a trickle of blood appearing on his lip. Izuku stood there, vibrating with power. The voice in his head was screaming, "Kill him. Tear him apart. Prove you are the strongest." He raised his hand to fire a Masatsugu Hado, a blast designed to disintegrate. "Do it!" Akuma roared, smiling like a maniac. "Give in!" Izuku froze. He saw the purple energy coating his hands. He felt the pure, unadulterated ecstasy of power. It felt good. It felt better than heroism. It felt like godhood. No, the image of Inko crying flashed in his mind. The image of All Might saving people with a smile. "If I do this, I am not Izuku Midoriya anymore. I am just a monster." Izuku screamed again, but this time it was a scream of denial. He grabbed his own wrist, forcing his arm down. He fought the energy, wrestling the demon back into its cage. The purple aura flickered and died, replaced by his standard blue ki. Izuku fell to his knees, gasping, returning to his senses. Akuma wiped the blood from his lip. He looked at the boy with a mixture of disappointment and intrigue. "You held it back," Akuma stated. "You had the power to strike, and you choked it." Izuku panted, looking at his trembling hands. "I control it." "It doesn't control me," Akuma scoffed, turning away. "A foolish distinction. But, your shoryuken has improved." It was the closest thing to a compliment Izuku had ever received. Part 4, The Return of the Demon Student, age 14, 10 years. 10 years of iron and blood. 10 years of winters that froze his eyelashes and summers that boiled his skin. Izuku stood at the entrance of the cave. He was 14 years old now. He wasn't tall. He stood at maybe 166 centimeters. But his presence was dense. He wore the standard black Gakurin uniform of Aldera Junior High, but the fabric was strained across his shoulders and chest. Underneath the uniform, his body was a roadmap of violence, scar tissue, dense muscle, and the invisible hum of a reactor core. He wore his red sneakers, now battered and replaced a dozen times. Around his neck, hidden beneath his collar, he wore a single large wooden bead on a string, a gift Akuma had tossed at him without a word. "Go," Akuma said from the darkness of the cave. "The exam is approaching. Go play with the children." "I will return," Izuku said. He bowed deeply. "Do not return until you have conquered," Akuma replied. "If you fail, do not speak my name." Izuku turned and walked down the mountain. He didn't stumble. He didn't struggle. He moved with a heavy, rhythmic gait. Returning to civilization was jarring. The noise of Muzurifu was an assault on his senses. He could hear conversations from a block away. He could smell the exhaust, the perfumes, the anxiety of the crowds. He walked into the apartment. Inko was making breakfast. She turned and dropped the spatula. "Izuku!" She rushed to him. She was shorter than him now. She hugged him, and he hugged her back. He was gentle, terrifyingly gentle, treating her like she was made of glass. "You're back for school?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "Yeah, Mom," Izuku said. His voice was deeper, calmer. "I'm back." He ate breakfast. He devoured 6 bowls of rice. Then, he picked up his yellow backpack and walked to Aldera Junior High. The school hadn't changed, but it felt smaller. The hallways felt narrow. The students seemed like colorful, noisy birds. Izuku walked to his classroom, 3A. He slid the door open. The chatter stopped. They remembered him. The ghost of Aldera. The kid who came to school sometimes, looking like he'd been in a car accident, and said nothing. He walked to his desk at the back. He sat down. The chair creaked ominously under his density. "Oh, Deku." The voice was rough, familiar, and laced with nitroglycerin. Katsuki Bakugo kicked Izuku's desk. Izuku didn't flinch. He slowly looked up. He saw Bakugo, arrogant, powerful, surrounded by his lackeys. 10 years ago, this sight would have made Izuku wet himself. Now, Izuku looked at Bakugo's neck. He saw the carotid artery pulsing. Weak point. Strike there, 3 pounds of pressure. Unconscious in 2 seconds, he looked at Bakugo's knee. Ligament exposed. A low kick would shatter the patella. Crippled for life. The thoughts came automatically. The Ansatsuken analyzed threats instantly. You're ignoring me? Bakugo growled. Sparks popped in his palms. I heard you're actually applying to UA. You? A quirkless reject? The class laughed. It was the same laughter as kindergarten. Yes, Izuku said. His voice was soft, but it carried through the room like a draft of cold air. Don't screw with me. Bakugo slammed his explosion palm onto Izuku's desk. Boom! The desk was scorched. Smoke rose. Usually, Deku would cry. Usually, he would apologize. Izuku stood up. He moved slowly, deliberately. He dusted the soot off his uniform sleeve. Then, he looked into Bakugo's eyes. For a second, just a fraction of a second, Izuku let the Satsui no Hado leak out. He didn't glow. He didn't scream. He simply projected his sake. To the rest of the class, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. To Bakugo, it was a hallucination. For a moment, Bakugo didn't see a nerd in a uniform. He saw a demon. He saw a pair of glowing red eyes in a void of darkness. He saw his own death reflected in those eyes. A primal, lizard brain signal screamed, Predator. Run! Bakugo flinched. He actually took a step back, sweat breaking out on his forehead. The illusion vanished. Izuku was just standing there, looking bored. Kaken, Izuku said, using the childhood nickname, but it sounded devoid of affection. You have a strong quirk. You are talented. He stepped around Bakugo, walking toward the door as the bell rang for the end of the day. But you have never been in a real fight. You think pain is something you inflict on others. You don't know what it is. What did you say? Bakugo's fear turned instantly to rage. He lunged, swinging a right hook aimed at Izuku's back. Die! The class screamed. The explosion was going to point-blank range. Whish! Bakugo's fist hit empty air. He stumbled, confused. Izuku wasn't there. Over here. Bakugo spun around. Izuku was standing by the doorway, 5 meters away. He hadn't run. There was no blur of motion. It was as if he had simply deleted himself from one point in space and pasted himself in another. Ashura Senku. Bakugo froze, his mind unable to process the speed. What the hell was that? Was that a quirk? You have a quirk? I told you, Izuku said, adjusting his backpack strap. I am quirkless. He looked at his hand, clenching it into a fist. The knuckles were white, scarred, and hard as iron. I just trained. He turned and walked out of the classroom, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. As he walked home, the sun setting over Mizurufu, Izuku felt the heavy bead around his neck. He thought of the entrance exam in 10 months. He thought of the heroes he would face. He wasn't going there to be a symbol of peace. He wasn't going there to make friends. He was going to UA to test his fist against the world. And God help anyone who stood in his way. Part 1, The Stagnant City. The sun hung low over Mizurufu, bathing the concrete jungle in a haze of burnt orange and deep violet. For most citizens, this was the golden hour, the time when the workday ended and the comfort of the evening began. For Izuku Midoriya, it was simply another transition of light, another rotation of a world he felt increasingly detached from. He walked the streets with a rhythmic, silent gait. His footsteps, despite the heavy rubber soles of his red sneakers, made no sound against the pavement. It was a habit drilled into him by 10 years of survival in the mountains. Step lightly, or starve. Step loudly, and the predator finds you. But here, in the city, he was the predator. He adjusted the strap of his yellow backpack. His mind was still replaying the encounter with Bakugo in the classroom. He flexed his right hand, looking at the calloused knuckles that were as hard as oak knots. Disappointing. That was the only word for it. For years, the memory of Katsuki Bakugo had been a specter haunting his childhood, a symbol of insurmountable strength and cruelty. Izuku had built him up in his mind as a dragon to be slain. But today, When he had looked into Bakugo's eyes, he hadn't seen a dragon. He had seen a chihuahua barking at a thunderstorm. He has power, Akuma's voice rumbled in his memory. But he lacks discipline. He swings his power like a child swings a stick. He relies on the explosion, not the fist behind it. Izuku sighed, the sound escaping his lips as a wisp of vapor, though the air was warm. His internal body temperature ran higher than normal people's now, a furnace stoked by the constant circulation of ki. He turned a corner, intending to take a shortcut through the Tatooine shopping district. He needed to buy fresh bandages and perhaps some high-protein supplements before heading back to the mountain for the weekend. Akuma had promised to teach him the Goshoryuken, the great rising dragon fist, if Izuku could split a waterfall with a hand strike. He was close, but as he approached the district, the air changed. The smell hit him first. It wasn't the usual scent of street food and exhaust. It was acrid, chemical, and vile. The smell of burning sewage and melting plastic. Then came the screams. Izuku stopped. His head tilted slightly to the side. The Satsui no Hado, the dark rhythm sleeping in the pit of his stomach, stirred. It sensed conflict. It sensed malice. Violence, it whispered. Go to it. Izuku didn't run. Running was for those who were panicked. He moved with purpose, his stride lengthening, weaving through the gathering crowd of onlookers with fluid grace. He slipped between shoulders and hips like water flowing through a dam, unnoticed until he was already past. He broke through the line of spectators and stopped at the yellow police tape. The scene before him was chaos. The alleyway was an inferno. Flames licked up the sides of the buildings, shattering windows and spewing black smoke into the twilight sky. In the center of the devastation was a creature born of nightmares, a shifting, undulating mass of dark green sludge. It had no solid form, only viscosity and malice, and it had a hostage. Izuku narrowed his eyes, the green irises sharpening into focus points. Trapped within the fluid body of the villain, struggling for air, was a boy with ash-blonde hair, Katsuki Bakugo. Part 2, The Paralysis of the Pros. The irony was not lost on Izuku. The boy who claimed to be the strongest, the future number one, was currently being worn like a skin suit by a sentient pile of waste. But what drew Izuku's attention wasn't the villain, or even Bakugo. It was the heroes. There were at least 4 of them. Death Arms, a man with immense physical strength. Kamui Woods, a rising star with a wood control quirk. Empty Lady, the giantess who loved the camera. Backdraft, the rescue specialist. They were doing nothing. I can't get close. Death Arms shouted, shielding his face from the heat. My punches just slide right off him. I can't get a grip. I need water. Kamui Woods yelled, retreating as the flames threatened to ignite his wooden limbs. My lacquer chain prison is useless against fire. The street is too narrow. Empty Lady cried from the back, striking a pose that looked more frustration than strategy. I can't grow without destroying the buildings. Excuses? Izuku listened to them, and he felt a cold, simmering rage rising in his chest. It wasn't the explosive anger of Bakugo. It was the deep, oceanic fury of Akuma. Look at them, the voice in his head hissed. These are the guardians of society? They stand by and watch a child die because the conditions aren't right? Where is All Might? A bystander screamed. Why isn't he here? He's been active all morning, another replied. He must be out of time. Izuku looked at the villain. The sludge creature was laughing, a wet gurgling sound. That's right. Stay back. The villain roared. I've got a new body suit. With this kid's explosive power and my fluidity, I'll be invincible. Just wait until I finish taking him over. Bakugo's head broke the surface of the sludge. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a terror Izuku had never seen before. He tried to scream, but the sludge forced its way into his mouth, gagging him. He was drowning. He was suffocating in filth while the heroes debated matchups. Bakugo's eyes locked onto the crowd. He wasn't looking for anyone specific. He was just looking for salvation. His gaze swept over the police, the heroes, and finally landed on Izuku. For a heartbeat, time froze. The bully and the victim. The genius and the defect. Bakugo's eyes pleaded. Help me. It was pathetic. It was weak. And that was why Izuku moved. Not because they were friends, they weren't. Not because he wanted to be a hero like the ones on TV, but because the Ansatsuken was the art of the assassin, the art of the predator, and a predator does not tolerate a scavenger playing with its food. Weakness disgusts me, Akuma had taught him. But those who prey on the weak without the strength to back it up, they are vermin. Izuku ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back! Death Arms yelled, reaching out a massive hand. He grabbed nothing but air. Izuku didn't run. He engaged his core, channeled ki into his legs, and leaned forward. Ashura Senku. To the onlookers, it looked like a glitch in reality. One moment, the boy in the black school uniform was standing by the tape. The next, he was a blurred streak of purple shadows, gliding across the pavement with zero friction. He moved faster than thought, passing the pro-heroes as if they were statues. He stopped 5 meters from the villain. He didn't skid. He simply ceased moving, his momentum killed instantly by perfect muscle control. The sludge villain blinked, his liquid eyes widening. What the? Another hero? You want to die too? He lashed out. A tentacle of high-velocity sludge, heavy enough to crack concrete, whipped toward Izuku's head. Die, brat. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He watched the tentacle coming. He saw the trajectory. He felt the displacement of the air. Too slow. Izuku shifted his weight to his back foot. He raised his right hand, knife hand style, and chopped the air. He didn't touch the slime. He struck the space in front of the slime. Tensho Kaireki. Heaven sent sea clearing. A blade of compressed wind pressure, honed by his ki, sliced through the air. It impacted the sludge tentacle and severed it clean off. The detached blob of slime splattered against the pavement, quivering. The villain screamed, not in pain, but in shock. What? You cut me? I'm liquid. Liquid has surface tension, Izuku said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly so amidst the roaring flames. Disrupt the tension, and you scatter. He took a step forward. The firelight danced in his green eyes, making them look like emeralds burning in a furnace. Let him go, Izuku commanded. The villain laughed nervously, pulling Bakugo deeper into his mass. You got a wind quirk? Big deal. I'll just swallow you whole. The sludge rose up like a tidal wave, towering over Izuku. It blocked out the setting sun. Izuku! Run! Bakugo managed to gurgle out, his pride momentarily forgotten in the face of death. Izuku ignored him. He dropped into a stance. Feet wide, knees bent, center of gravity low. He placed his right fist at his hip, his left hand open in front of him. He inhaled. The air whistled as it rushed into his lungs, mixing with the ki circulating in his blood. Satsui no Hado opened the gate slightly. A dark, purple aura began to bleed off Izuku's body. It was heavy, oppressive. The flames nearest to him actually leaned away, as if the fire itself was afraid of the energy radiating from this small boy. The villain hesitated. His survival instinct, honed by years of petty crime, was screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't a hero. Heroes felt like light. This felt like death. I said, Izuku whispered, the sound carrying over the roar of the fire. Let him go. Die. The villain panicked and brought his entire mass crashing down, intending to crush Izuku under tons of fluid pressure. Izuku's eyes flashed. Go Shoryuken. He didn't jump. He drove his fist upward. It wasn't a simple uppercut. It was a corkscrew motion, every muscle in his body, from his toes to his knuckles, firing in a perfect chain of kinetic energy. He channeled the Hado into the strike, condensing the energy into a pinpoint. His fist met the falling wall of sludge. Boom! The sound was like a cannon shot. The impact didn't just push the slime back, it obliterated the structure of the villain's body. The force of the punch created a vacuum tunnel straight up through the center of the villain. The air pressure exploded outward, creating a shockwave that shattered the windows of the remaining shops on the street. The sludge didn't splash. It vaporized into a fine mist. The villain shrieked as his cohesion was destroyed. He was blown apart, scattered into thousands of droplets that rained down on the street like disgusting precipitation. In the center of the crater where the villain had stood, Bakugo fell to his knees, coughing and retching, covered in slime but alive. And standing over him was Izuku. Izuku's fist was still raised toward the sky, steam rising from his knuckles. The purple aura faded slowly, retracting back into his skin. Total silence descended on the street. The fire was still burning, but no one heard it. The heroes were jaw-dropped. Death Arms had dropped his cigar. Empty Lady was staring with wide eyes. Izuku lowered his arm. He shook the excess slime off his hand with a sharp snap. He looked down at Bakugo. Bakugo was trembling. He looked up, his eyes meeting Izuku's. He expected the hand. He expected the "Are you okay, Kaken?" He expected the Deku he had bullied for a decade to try and save his pride. But Izuku didn't offer a hand. He looked at Bakugo with eyes that glowed faintly red in the twilight. A lingering effect of the Hado. "You looked like a drowning rat," Izuku said. His voice was devoid of mockery, devoid of pity. It was simply a statement of fact. Bakugo grit his teeth. I didn't ask for your help. A warrior does not wait to be asked," Izuku replied coldly. "And a victim does not get to choose his savior." He turned his back on Bakugo. "Wait." Bakugo tried to stand, but his legs were still jelly. "What the hell was that?" That wasn't a quirk." Izuku stopped. He looked over his shoulder. The terrifying aura flared for just a second, freezing Bakugo in place. "You're right. It's not a quirk. It's effort. Something you wouldn't understand." Part 3, The Hollow Praise. The silence broke. "Holy crap!" Someone in the crowd yelled. "Did you see that? He one-shot the villain! Who is that kid?" The pro-heroes shook off their stupor and rushed in. But the dynamic was wrong. Usually, they would praise the bravery of a civilian. But the violence of Izuku's act unnerved them. He hadn't just defeated the villain. He had dismantled him with a brutality that felt excessive. Kamui Woods and Death Arms cornered Izuku near the police tape. "You!" Death Arms shouted, pointing a finger. "That was incredibly reckless. You're a middle schooler, aren't you? You used the quirk in public without a license. You could have been killed. And you," Kamui Woods added, though his tone was less aggressive, "you interfered with official hero business. While your power is impressive, you disrupted the containment strategy." Izuku looked at them. He stood with his arms crossed, his posture radiating boredom. "Containment strategy?" Izuku repeated. He gestured to the burning buildings. "You mean watching him die?" Death Arms flushed red. "We were waiting for a suitable quirk. My punches weren't working, so you gave up," Izuku said. "We didn't give up. We were minimizing damage. You were paralyzed by your own incompetence," Izuku interrupted, his voice cutting through their excuses. "You rely so much on your specific abilities that when you face a bad matchup, you become useless. You aren't heroes. You're one-trick ponies. You little..." Death Arms stepped forward, intimidated by the sheer audacity of this child. Izuku's eyes narrowed. "Do not touch me." The killing intent, Saki, hit Death Arms like a physical wall. The pro-hero stopped mid-step, his instincts screaming that if he touched this boy, he would lose the hand. It was an absurdity. A pro-hero afraid of a student, but the primitive part of his brain couldn't deny the signal. Hey, easy now." Backdraft intervened, sensing the tension. "Let's calm down. The kid did save the hostage. The villain is, well, he's in pieces, but the police are collecting him. No one died." Izuku turned away from them. He felt disgusted. This was the society that rejected him. These were the idols? "I'm leaving," Izuku said. "Wait, we need to take a statement." A police officer cried. "You have my name. Izuku Midoriya. Aldera Junior High. If you want to arrest me for saving a life while your pros watched, come find me." He walked under the police tape and disappeared into the crowd. The people parted for him like the Red Sea, staring with a mixture of awe and fear. They sensed it too. This wasn't a normal hero in training. This was something dangerous. Part 4, The Skeletal Symbol. Izuku walked for 20 minutes before the adrenaline faded. The Satsui no Hado receded, leaving him feeling hollow and hungry. Using the Go-Shoryuken without a proper warm-up had strained his shoulder. He rolled it, feeling the joint pop. Akuma will be displeased, he thought. I used the technique to save a bully. He will say I am soft. But then, he remembered the feeling of the impact. The perfection of the kinetic chain. The absolute destruction of the obstacle. No, Izuku thought. He will be pleased with the power. He will mock the motive, but he will respect the result. He turned down a quiet residential street, intending to take the long way home to clear his head. The sun had set, and the street lights were flickering on. I am here, the voice boomed from the sky. Izuku stopped and looked up. All Might dropped from the air, landing in front of him in a cloud of dust. He was in his muscle form, smiling his trademark smile, though it looked strained. Young man! I have been looking for you. All Might bellowed, striking a pose. You were difficult to track down. You move very stealthily. Izuku stared at him. The #1 hero. The man whose poster was still on his wall, though the meaning had changed. All Might, Izuku said, bowing slightly out of respect for the man's strength, if nothing else. I witnessed your actions back there. All Might said, giving a thumbs up. Simply amazing. While the pros stood idle, you jumped in. You saved that boy. He was loud, Izuku said flatly. And the heroes were incompetent. All Might faltered slightly. Ah, well, yes, it was a difficult situation. But that is not the point. I wanted to ask you, that power. What is your quirk? It felt familiar yet different. It was like a shockwave of pure spirit. I don't have a quirk, Izuku said. All Might froze. Excuse me? I am quirkless, Izuku repeated. Biologically. I have the toe joint. The doctor confirmed it when I was 4. All Might deflated. Literally. With a poof of steam, the muscular giant vanished. In his place stood a skeletal, emaciated man with sunken eyes and blood trickling from his mouth. Izuku didn't blink. He didn't scream. He analyzed. Transformation? No, illusion wears off. This is damage. Massive internal injury. Respiratory system compromised. Stomach missing. You're injured, Izuku stated. The skeletal All Might wiped the blood from his chin. You aren't surprised? I was trained to see weakness, Izuku said. Even in your muscle form, your stance favors your right side. You protect your left flank. A catastrophic injury to the respiratory system, perhaps 5 years old? All Might stared at the boy stunned. You, who are you? Just a student, Izuku said. All Might sighed, sitting down on a nearby guardrail. You're sharp, kid. Sharper than any pro I know. Yes, I am injured. My time as a hero is running out. He looked at Izuku with a renewed intensity. Young man. I have been looking for a successor. Someone to inherit my power. My quirk, one for all, is a torch passed down from generation to generation. It stockpiles power and transfers it to the next holder. All Might stood up, his skeletal hand clutching his chest. I saw you today. You moved when others didn't. You have the heart of a hero. And if you are quirkless, then you know the struggle of being weak. You know the value of power better than anyone. He extended a hand. Izuku Midoriya. I want you to inherit my power. I want you to become the next symbol of peace. It was the dream. It was everything the 4-year-old Izuku had wanted to hear. The greatest hero in the world offering him the greatest power. Izuku looked at All Might's hand. He felt the Hado burn in his gut. Take it, a voice whispered. Add it to the Ansatsuken. You would be a god. But then, he looked at All Might's eyes. They were kind. They were hopeful. They were self-sacrificing. He wants a martyr, Izuku realized. He wants someone to burn themselves out to keep the world warm. Akuma's face flashed in his mind. The demon who taught him that power was self-actualization. That power was freedom. Izuku shook his head. No. All Might blinked. No? Perhaps I didn't explain it well. This is the power to save everyone. To be the #1. I don't want your power, Izuku said firmly. He stepped back. You offer me a power that is given, Izuku said. Power that is given is not true strength. It is alone. If I take your power, I am just wearing your shadow. I am just All Might II. He raised his own fist, the scarred, calloused knuckles catching the streetlight. I have spent 10 years breaking my bones and tearing my muscles to build this power. Every ounce of strength I have is mine. I earned it in blood. I didn't win a lottery, and I didn't get a handout, young Midoriya. All Might looked heartbroken. It is not about handouts. It is about duty. Your duty is to a society that mocks the weak, Izuku countered. A society that created that sludge villain and then watched him attack a child. I will not carry the burden of maintaining a broken system. Izuku turned to leave. I have a master, Izuku said over his shoulder. He taught me that the path to the strongest is a lonely one. I don't need one for all to be the strongest. I will surpass you, All Might, and I will do it with my own 2 hands. All Might watched him go. He watched the small back of the boy who had just rejected the world's greatest gift. He should have felt insulted. He should have felt worried. But as he watched Izuku vanish into the shadows, Toshinori Yagi felt a shiver of something else. Fear? Perhaps. Respect? Definitely. A master. All Might whispered to the empty street. Who on earth could train a child to have eyes like that? Part 5. The Awakening of the Obsession. Later that night the news was flooded with reports of the incident. They praised the mystery student and his powerful kinetic quirk. In the Bakugo household, Katsuki sat in his room, staring at his hands. They were shaking. He replayed the moment over and over. The red eyes. The overwhelming pressure. The way Deku had looked at him, not as a rival, but as an annoyance. He looked down on me, Bakugo whispered. He looked down on me. He grabbed a pillow and exploded it, feathers raining down like snow. I'll kill him. I'll crush him. I'll prove I'm better. But deep down, in the part of his heart he would never admit existed, Katsuki Bakugo knew the truth. Today, he had met a monster. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't the scariest thing in the room. High in the mountains, in the cave that smelled of sulfur and incense, Akuma sat in meditation. Izuku walked in. He was tired, smelling of burnt sludge and city smoke. He knelt before the master. I saw the news, Akuma grumbled without opening his eyes. Izuku tensed. Master, you saved the boy. Yes. Why? Izuku thought for a moment. He could lie. He could say it was to test his power. Because he was weak, Izuku said truthfully. And the villain was mocking strength. It offended me. Akuma's eyes opened. A slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. Arrogance, Akuma chuckled darkly. Good. You are beginning to understand. The lion does not save the sheep because he loves them. He saves them because the wolf is trespassing in his territory. Akuma stood up. He threw a heavy GI at Izuku. Clean yourself. Tomorrow, we train the Tatsumaki Senpukyaku. The entrance exam is in 10 months. If you are to enter their hero's school, Akuma punched the stone wall, leaving a fist-sized crater. You must be ready to show them what a true demon looks like. Izuku caught the GI. He looked up the fist print in the wall. A small, rare smile touched his lips. OSU. Part 1. The Gates of the Fortress. The campus of UA High was less a school and more a fortress of glass and steel, gleaming arrogantly under the February sun. It was a monument to the superhuman society, a temple where the gods of the next generation were forged. For thousands of applicants, standing before the massive H-shaped gate was a moment of awe. They trembled with nerves, clutching their exam slips, whispering prayers to whatever deities governed luck and quirks. Izuku Midoriya stood among them, but he did not tremble. He wore the standard black gakurin of his junior high, but it fit him poorly. His shoulders were too broad, his neck too thick. Under the fabric, his body was a coil of wire and iron, honed by a decade of hell. He stood with his feet planted firmly, his breathing rhythmic and undetectable. He looked at the gate not with reverence, but with assessment. Glass walls, he noted. Structural weaknesses at the corner joints. If attacked, strike the foundation pillars. Stupid Deku. The growl came from behind him. Izuku didn't turn. He knew the heavy, stomping gait of Katsuki Bakugo. Get out of my way, Bakugo hissed as he walked past, bumping Izuku's shoulder intentionally. Don't block the path. Just because you pulled a stunt with the sludge villain doesn't mean you belong here. You're going to die in the practical. Izuku watched Bakugo walk away, his posture hunched with aggression. He is tight, Izuku analyzed. His muscles are tense with anxiety masked as rage. He wastes energy just walking. Izuku took a step forward, and the crowd seemed to part around him instinctively. It was a phenomenon he had grown used to over the last few years. The ki he cultivated, even when suppressed, created a subtle pressure field. Animals avoided him. People gave him a wide berth without knowing why. It was the scent of a predator. As he walked, his foot caught on a raised paving stone. He didn't trip. His balance was absolute. However, the girl walking next to him was not so lucky. Distracted by her own nerves, she stumbled over his foot and pitched forward. Wah! She braced for impact with the concrete. It never came. Izuku didn't catch her in a romantic embrace. He simply extended a hand with lightning speed, grabbing the back of her coat collar. He stopped her fall instantly, holding her suspended a few inches from the ground with zero effort, his arm steady as a steel beam. He hoisted her back onto her feet and released her immediately. Be mindful of your footing, Izuku said, his voice flat. Balance is the foundation of survival. The girl, a brunette with a round face and pink cheeks, blinked, flustered. She adjusted her coat. Oh. Thank you. I was just so nervous, I guess I spaced out. I'm Uraraka Ochako. It's nice to meet you, she beamed at him. It was a blindingly bright expression. Izuku stared at her. Akuma had never taught him how to deal with bubbliness. Nerves are a distraction, Izuku stated. Clear your mind. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Uraraka blinking in confusion. Intense, she whispered. Part 2, The Mind of a Destroyer. The written exam was a formality, but Akuma had not neglected the mind. To destroy a body, you must know anatomy, Akuma had said, tossing a thick medical textbook at a 6-year-old Izuku. To destroy a building, you must know physics. To destroy a spirit, you must know psychology. Read. Izuku sat in the exam hall, the pencil looking like a toothpick in his calloused hand. He moved through the questions with mechanical precision. Question 4. Calculate the trajectory of a projectile with mass x. Izuku wrote the answer instantly. He did not need the formula. He felt the trajectory. He had thrown rocks, logs, and his own body through the air thousands of times. Physics was not abstract to him. It was the language of the world he lived in. Question 12. Ethical response to a hostage situation. Izuku paused. The correct hero answer was to de-escalate and prioritize safety. The Akuma answer was to eliminate the threat before the hostage could be harmed, accepting collateral damage as the price of victory. Izuku wrote the hero answer. He was here to infiltrate their ranks, not to be expelled on day 1 for sociopathy. But as he wrote, he felt the lie of it. Safety is a luxury, he thought. Victory is a necessity. When the written exam concluded, the applicants were herded into a massive auditorium for the orientation. Present Mike, the voice hero, stood on stage screaming into a microphone that amplified his voice to ear-splitting levels. Everybody say hey. Silence. Izuku sat in the middle row, his arms crossed, eyes closed. He was meditating. He was cycling his ki, pushing it through his meridians to keep his body warm and loose. The noise of the hero was irritating, a buzzing fly. Welcome to my live show. Today, you listeners will be conducting a 10-minute urban mock battle. President Mike explained the rules. 3 types of robots. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. Destroy them to earn a score. Excuse me. May I ask a question? A tall boy with glasses and blue hair stood up, his hand raised like a blade. A spotlight hit him. There appear to be 4 types of villains on this handout. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. We examinees are here in this place because we wish to be molded into exemplary heroes. The boy spun around and pointed a finger directly at Izuku. In addition, you with the curly hair and the dark aura. You've been muttering under your breath and emitting a low humming sound this entire time. It's distracting. If you're here on a pleasure trip, then you should leave immediately. The auditorium went deadly silent. All eyes turned to Izuku. Izuku opened his eyes. The green irises seemed to glow in the dim light. The humming sound was the vibration of his ki, something he did unconsciously when focusing. He looked at the blue-haired boy. Tenya Ida. You are loud, Izuku said. His voice wasn't shouted, but it carried through the silence with a strange, resonant quality. And you lack focus. If a little noise distracts you, you are already dead on the battlefield. Ida recoiled, shocked by the bluntness. What? I am simply pointing out proper conduct. You are pointing out your own fragility, Izuku interrupted, standing up. You focus on the paper. You focus on the rules. You focus on me. Meanwhile, you have failed to notice that the pro-hero on stage has not finished his explanation. He sat back down and closed his eyes. Sit down and listen. Ida stood there, mouth agape, before slowly sinking back into his seat, face burning red. Present Mike coughed awkwardly. Okay. Thank you, listener 7111, for the cool breakdown. The fourth villain is 0 points. It's an obstacle. A gimmick. Think of it like a thwomp from Super Mario. If you see it, run away. Run away, Izuku thought. We shall see. Part 3, The Start Line. Battle Center B was a replica of a city district, complete with paved roads, office buildings, and streetlights. It was impressive, but to Izuku, it was just a playground. He stood in the crowd of examinees wearing a plain dark green tracksuit he had bought from a discount store. He wore no support gear. No gauntlets. No boots. Just his taped hands and his red sneakers. The other students were stretching, checking their gadgets, hyperventilating. Man, I'm nervous, a boy with spiky red hair said. Just got a blast M. A blonde boy with a laser belt muttered. Izuku stood perfectly still. He was visualizing the flow of ki. Dantian to shoulder. Shoulder to elbow. Elbow to fist. He saw Uraraka nearby, taking deep breaths. She looked at him, about to wave, but stopped when she saw the intensity of his focus. He looked like a statue carved from ore. And start! Present Mick's voice blared from the tower. The students hesitated. They were waiting for a countdown. A whistle. A flag. Izuku vanished. Ashura Senku. He didn't run, he glided. He moved so fast that the wind pressure of his departure knocked the boy standing next to him onto his rear. By the time the other students processed the word start, Izuku was already inside the city. What are you doing? Present Mike yelled over the speakers. There are no countdowns in a real fight. Run! Follow that kid! The mob surged forward, but they were already behind. Inside the city, the slaughter had begun. Part 4, The Ansatsuken. A three-pointer, a massive robot resembling a tank with arms, rolled around a corner, its sensors locking onto the first heat signature it found. Target acquired. It raised a cannon arm. Izuku sprinted toward it. He didn't dodge. He ran straight at the firing line. Die, Izuku whispered. He leaped. It wasn't a hero's jump. It was a predator's pounce. He rotated his body in midair, his leg extending like a whip. Tatsumaki Senpukyaku. Hurricane kick. He defied physics. Channeling ki into his legs, he spun in the air, suspending himself through sheer rotational force. His heel smashed into the robot's head. Crunch. Metal shrieked. The robot's head wasn't just kicked off, it was torn from the chassis by the torque. Izuku completed the rotation, landing gracefully on the hood of the destroyed machine as it exploded beneath him. 3 points. He pushed off, launching himself toward a balcony on the second floor of a building. 2 one-pointers were scuttling across the roof. Izuku didn't slow down. He punched the air. Hadouken. A sphere of blue, condensed spirit energy shot from his palm. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of a softball, but it moved at the speed of a bullet. It punched a clean hole through the first robot's central processor. The robot collapsed, sparking. The second robot lunged. Izuku sidestepped, grabbing its metal arm. With a roar, he used its own momentum to swing it over his shoulder, slamming it onto the concrete roof with enough force to crack the building's structure. 5 points. It was efficient. It was brutal. It was beautiful. In the observation room, a dark room filled with screens, the teachers of Yue watched in silence. Who is that? Midnight asked, licking her lips. He fights like a wild animal, but his technique is flawless. Examinee 2234. Izuku Midoriya Nizu, the principal, read from a tablet. Quirk, none listed. None? Snipe adjusted his mask. You're telling me that kid is quirkless? He just punched through 3 inches of steel plate. It's martial arts, Aizawa, Eraserhead, muttered. He was leaning forward, his tired eyes narrowed. But it's not sport martial arts. That's a killing style. Look at where he aims. The neck. The sensors. The joints. He isn't trying to disable. He's trying to terminate. He has no hesitation, All Might thought, watching the screen. He saw the way Izuku moved. It was the movement of someone who had faced death before. Young Midoriya, just what kind of training did you endure? Back in the city, the exam had turned into a race. Izuku was moving too fast for the others to keep up. He turned a corner and found a group of students pinned down by a squadron of two-pointers. Help! A student with a tail cried, dodging a rubber bullet. Izuku dropped from a lamppost. He landed in the center of the robots. Shoryuken. Rising Dragon. He drove an uppercut into the chin of the lead robot. The force was so great it lifted the one-ton machine into the air. While it was airborne, Izuku spun and delivered a roundhouse kick to the second robot, denting its chassis inward. He didn't look at the students he had saved. He kept moving. He's incredible. The tailed boy whispered. But, he's terrifying. By the 8-minute mark, Izuku had racked up 60 points. His tracksuit was dusty. His knuckles were scraped, but he wasn't even out of breath. He stood atop a pile of scrap metal, scanning the horizon. Too easy, he thought. These machines are slow. They telegraph their attacks. Akuma strikes faster than thought. These things strike faster than a snail. He felt disappointed. Was this the best Yue had to offer? Part 5. The God of Destruction. Then, the ground shook. It started as a vibration in the soles of his feet, then escalated to a rhythmic earthquake. Boom. 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 Buildings crumbled. Dust clouds rose like curtains of doom. From the center of the city rose the zero-pointer. It was colossal. It towered over the skyscrapers, a monstrosity of green metal and red lights. It was the size of a kaiju. Its mere movement displaced enough air to knock students over. Total destruction. The robot roared, its voice shaking the windows of the city. Panic ensued. Run! It's huge! That's not an obstacle, that's a death sentence. The students turned and fled. It was the logical choice. There were no points to be gained. Survival was the only objective. Izuku stood his ground. The wind whipped his green hair back. He looked up at the behemoth. Big, he thought. Slow. He turned to leave. Akuma's teachings were clear. Do not waste energy on a fight that yields no profit. The robot was 0 points. Defeating it proved nothing but vanity. Ow! The cry was faint, buried under the sound of collapsing masonry. Izuku paused. His ear twitched. He looked back. Amidst the rubble, in the shadow of the advancing Titan, lay Uraraka. A piece of concrete had pinned her leg. She was struggling to free herself, but the zero-pointer was looming over her, its massive tread about to crush the street where she lay. Izuku looked at her. He looked at the fleeing students. The weak die, Akuma's voice said. It is nature. Izuku looked at his hand. He clenched it. But I am not nature, Izuku thought. I am the one who conquers it. If he ran, he was doing what a logical person would do. But he didn't want to be logical. He wanted to be the strongest. And the strongest do not run from anything. Furthermore, leaving her to die, or be saved by the safety pros, felt distasteful. It felt like cowardice. Izuku turned around. He dropped his center of gravity. He closed his eyes for a split second. He reached deep into the pit of his stomach. Past the discipline. Past the calm. He touched the gate of the Satsui no Hado. Just a leak, he told himself. Just enough to kill a god. His eyes snapped open. They were glowing bright red. Dark purple energy, like heavy smoke, began to pour off his body. The pebbles around his feet began to float, suspended by the sheer density of his rising aura. Ray-a-Raph! Izuku roared. He crouched and exploded upward. The ground beneath him shattered, leaving a crater 5 meters wide. He shot into the air like a missile, a streak of purple darkness against the blue sky. He rose higher. Past the first floor. Past the 10th. Past the robot's shoulder. He hung in the air, face to face with the zero-pointer's massive visual sensors. The robot seemed to pause, its processors confused by the energy reading of the gnat in front of it. Izuku pulled his hands back to his side. He didn't form a fist. He held his palms open, fingers clawed, wrestling with the ball of void energy forming between them. It wasn't blue. It was a deep, violently pulsating purple. Masatsu. Murder/obliteration. In the observation room, All Might stood up, knocking his chair over. That energy. Aizawa, look at the monitor. The readings are off the charts. What is he doing? Aizawa whispered, his eyes wide. He's going to kill it. Izuku thrust his palms forward. Gahada! Great surge. A massive beam of purple ki erupted from his hands. It wasn't a ball. It was a continuous stream of destruction, a laser of pure killing intent. The beam hit the zero-pointer's face. There was no sound at first. Then, a high-pitched whine of melting metal. The beam drilled through the robot's head armor like a hot knife through butter. It incinerated the internal mechanisms, punched through the rear armor, and continued into the sky, parting the clouds above the city. The head of the zero-pointer disintegrated. The massive machine groaned, the metal glowing cherry red around the edges of the missing section. Explosions rippled down the chassis. The giant tilted backward, defeated by a single strike from a boy who weighed less than one of its bolts. Gravity took hold of Izuku. He began to fall. The purple aura vanished, leaving him exhausted. His arms smoked. His muscles screamed. I overdid it, he thought, watching the ground rush up. Akuma will scold me for wasting ki. He didn't have a way to land safely from this height without breaking his legs. He braced himself, preparing to roll and take the damage. Slap! A hand touched his cheek. He stopped falling. He floated there, inches from the ground. Uraraka, pale and nauseous, held her hands together. She released her quirk, and Izuku dropped the remaining inch to the pavement. She vomited sparkles immediately after. Izuku stood up. He shook his arms out. He looked at the burning wreckage of the zero-pointer. The buzzer sounded. Time's up. Part 6, The Aftermath. Silence reigned in Battle Center B. The students slowly crept out from their hiding spots. They looked at the decapitated giant. They looked at the boy standing in the street, his tracksuit slightly singed, his expression unreadable. He destroyed it, the red-haired boy gasped. He took out the zero-pointer in one hit. What kind of monster is he? Ida adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling. He jumped to save that girl. I judged him for his attitude, but he acted while I froze. An old woman hobbled through the crowd. Recovery girl. All right, make way, make way. Any injuries? She reached Izuku. She looked him over. You, she said, tapping his shin with her cane. You're full of microfractures. And your ki meridians are inflamed. You used a technique your body isn't ready for. It was necessary, Izuku said. Here. She kissed his cheek. Strength drained from him as his body accelerated its healing. He stumbled, but caught himself. You're a reckless one, she muttered, handing him a gummy. But you've got spirit. Scary spirit, but spirit nonetheless. Izuku ate the gummy. He looked at Uraraka, who was being helped up by Ida. She looked at him and gave a weak, thumbs-up smile. Izuku nodded once, stiffly. He turned and walked toward the exit. He didn't stay to chat. He didn't stay to brag. The exam was over. He had conquered. Part 7, The Verdict. 1 week later, Izuku was in the mountains, meditating under a waterfall. The freezing water pounded against his shoulders, but he didn't feel it. He was visualizing the Masatsu Hado. It had been sloppy. The beam had dispersed too much. Inko walked up the path, holding a letter. She looked terrified and excited. Izuku! It came! From Yue! Izuku stepped out of the waterfall. Steam rose from his body as he dried instantly with a flare of ki. He took the envelope. It was heavy. He sat on a rock and tore it open. A holographic disc fell out. A projection sprang to life. I am here as a projection. All Might's face filled the air. He was in his yellow suit, smiling. Young Midoriya. It has been a week. I am happy to announce that I will be teaching at Yue this year. Izuku watched him passively. You performed admirably in the written exam. Perfection. But the practical, the practical. The screen changed. It showed a scoreboard. Izuku Midoriya. Villain points, 65. Rescue points, 0. Izuku frowned. 0 rescue points? Even though I saved the girl? Wait! All Might shouted. That is what you would see if we only graded on destruction. But UA is a hero's school. And what is a hero without the drive to save? The video shifted. It showed the clip of Izuku facing the zero-pointer. The purple beam tearing the sky. You faced overwhelming danger to save a fellow examinee. You risked your score, your safety, and your life. That is the essence of heroism. Even if All Might's voice dropped to a serious tone, your methods were terrifyingly efficient. The score updated. Rescue points, 60. The judges were impressed. Aizawa-kun noted your tactical awareness. Nizu-kun enjoyed the physics of your kicks. And I saw a boy who refused to let fear dictate his actions. Total score, 125. First place. All Might shouted. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya. You have passed. This is your Hero Academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat there, looking at the device. Akuma stepped out from the shadows of the cave. He had been listening. First place, Akuma grunted. Yes, master, you saved the girl. She was in the way of my target, Izuku lied smoothly. Akuma stared at him. He knew it was a lie. But he also knew that to reach the pinnacle of the Ansatsuken, one needed conflict. If Izuku wanted to play hero, let him. The conflict between his dark power and his noble goals would only make the Hado stronger. Go, Akuma said. Go to their school. Show them that a demon can wear a uniform. Izuku crushed the envelope in his hand. He looked at the sunset. Yue Hai, he thought. I am coming, and I am bringing the storm with me.